So the other big news that came out last week was the annual announcement of who's going to be in the newest class of the International Boxing Hall of Fame. That announcement was made early December. They'll be inducted in early June in Canastota, New York. It's upstate New York. The lead inductee, of course, is Manny Pacquiao. That was a given no matter what. But the other two modern boxers selected were Michael Nunn and Vinny Pazienza. There were also three modern women boxers, Jessica Chavez and Sophie Mathis and Mary Jo Sanders, as well as some various other people like referee Kenny Bayless, some journalists. I forgot to say, referee Harry Gibbs of the UK was among the honorees. But the big headline, even more so than Manny Pacquiao being selected, was the debate or absolute astonishment that Vinny Pazienza was voted in. I don't know how closely you followed Pazienza's career. He was really at his peak when you and I were both very young. But how did you take the news that Pazienza was among these inductees?
I've got to be truthful. I don't actually know a lot about him. But I guess the bit which intrigues me more than anything is how it all works. So how does somebody end up being inducted into the Hall of Fame? Like, how do they get shortlisted? Who gets the final say? I mean, like, how does all that stuff work?
So there are answers to some of those questions and no answers from me, at least, for the others. And that is part of the problem, is the lack of transparency. So the names that are put onto the ballot, they have to be retired. I think it used to be a minimum of 5 years since they retired. It's now a minimum of 3 years since they retired. Those names are selected by a committee run by the Boxing Hall of Fame. There are people who are not on the ballot that a lot of boxing writers think should be on the ballot. And there are people who probably shouldn't be on the ballot who are still taking up space on there. Then, for each category, there's a certain number of votes. There's a minimum number of inductees every year. And so in the modern category, there are at least 3 inductees for the male boxers every year. That is contrary to the way that baseball, the American pastime, the way that that's done. Voters for the Baseball Hall of Fame, there have to be at least 75% of voters picking somebody for them to be able to get in. So it sets this minimum threshold. There's no minimum threshold in boxing. So what could happen is the voters could sit down. They have 5 fighters that they could pick. They could pick Manny Pacquiao and split their 4 votes between the other guys. It's wholly possible, me not knowing the exact number, that Pazienza got in with fewer people voting for him than voted for other candidates. It could have been that like he had 20 or 25% of the vote, but he still had a plurality as compared to the many other names on the ballot. As for your question for who does the voting, if you are a full member of the Boxing Writers Association of America, you have a vote. And there's a handful of other voters. We don't know how many. We don't know whom, but listed as historians and observers who also have a vote. I would love to see a list of who the voters are, and I would love to see vote totals so that we know how many people got these votes every year. I'd also love to see that minimum threshold. But the big issue is that I imagine most of these voters are from the United States. They might not be making the best choices. They might be voting off of the idea of, oh, well, the word fame is in this, as opposed to just voting for the best of the best, the greatest of the greatest, the way that halls of fame are supposed to be for the top inductees, not realizing that there are parts of the museum that can recognize these other guys. And they're giving that kind of love to a Vinny Pazienza who twice held a world title, never made a single successful defense of his world titles, never beat any other Hall of Famers in their prime. He did have 2 wins over a very old Roberto Duran. Didn't have a good record against other guys, but because he was famous, because they enjoyed watching him, they give him more of a benefit of the doubt than they might give somebody like Nigel Benn, who had a much better record, is on the ballot, and was also incredibly popular, but happens to be from the UK.
So it sounds like it's a very similar setup to how some of the governing bodies work then. Because I don't know if you use this saying in the US, but we've got a saying in the UK where we call stuff the old boys club, where there's like a selection of old timers who rule the roost and are the decision makers and kind of do what they want because they've been there and they've been around for a long time. So is the International Boxing Hall of Fame in a way similar to a WBC or an IBF or one of those? What's your opinion?
I wouldn't go that far.
Okay. Oh, blimey. Okay.
I think that the International Boxing Hall of Fame is very well intentioned, but it seems as if they are resistant to change. And it's not that this kind of thing happens often, but there are inductees who very much raise their eyebrows. There's some people who are not offended by Arturo Gatti being in. I know that I am a big fan of Arturo Gatti. He's the reason that I got as into boxing again. And I have so many fond memories of watching him. I loved watching him fight. I don't think that he should be in the Hall of Fame. So guys like him or Ingemar Johansson or now Vinny Pazienza, there seems to be different standards for certain boxers in the United States than there are for other guys on the ballot. I'm amazed that Pazienza got in, but Israel Vasquez did not, that Antonio Tarver did not. I know that there was a concerted PR campaign. I think that there's a system that needs to be changed, and that in lieu of those changes, it's vulnerable to having some moments that raise the eyebrows and, in the eyes of some, not me, will tarnish the integrity of that institution.
This is interesting stuff, and this is just me thinking out loud and asking you questions which I genuinely want to know the answers to, and I know that people in Britain will want to know the answers to as well. The International Boxing Hall of Fame is, I wouldn't say it's of massive interest in the UK. People are obviously aware of it. It sounds like, and this isn't just from my conversations with you, but with others in the States, it sounds like it's a bit of a bigger deal in the US, and it's probably cared about a little bit more in the US than it is in the UK. And I'm not for one moment saying people don't care about it in the UK, and people do use it a lot. So, like at the boxing on Saturday, Frank Warren got into the ring to present an award to a member of the Queensbury team who'd worked with him for 40 years, and he was introduced as Frank Warren, International Boxing Hall of Fame promoter. So, it's mentioned and it's spoken about in articles and so on. But yeah, I don't think it is as bigger of a topic this side of the pond as it is that side of the pond. But you mentioned earlier on about the what's the Writers Association? You said if you're a full member, which one is it?
The Boxing Writers Association of America.
So you're not, are you a member of that?
I am.
So you don't get to vote though.
No, I do get the vote. So I voted. Yeah, so I voted for Pacquiao and Nunn and Tarver and Israel Vasquez and a fighter named Santos Alicia. Those were my 5 votes this year.
So okay, I'm with you. So you get to vote. So you do have an impact on that. But your grumble is you don't get to see where the votes came from for other people who were inducted in.
We don't know who all the voters are. We know that all the full members in the BWAA, like me, get votes, but we don't know who the other voters are, whether they might have conflicts of interest. And then beyond that, we don't know what the vote totals are that come in. I know that to our UK listeners, this might not seem like a big deal or as big a deal, but being in the Boxing Hall of Fame does matter to the inductees. Even the people who aren't in the Boxing Hall of Fame, when fighters or other people in the industry come to the induction weekend, which I think every boxing fan should go to every year, in the US at least, it's not like being in the UK where you could go to a pub and find another boxing fan. When you go to Canastota, you're in this small town, you have immediate access to all these fighters. You can walk up to pretty much everybody and have a conversation. And the fighters and other people in the industry, they love that. It's just this ability to be around people who love what you love, and for the fighters to be able to be around these fans. And so when you make it into the Boxing Hall of Fame, it is a big deal. there's some emotion in it. And even if you are not from the United States, we've seen Japanese fighters, we've seen Ricky Hatton come in. They very much enjoy the honor.
So another question for you, and you've got me intrigued now. So with the voting and you getting your vote, and from what you were saying earlier on, does your vote count as much as other people's votes? Like, is that how it works, or is there people who have got a higher status? And I don't know. Does it work in the same way that politics might work?
We have the same vote, so far as I know. I don't think that there's any like being a super shareholder for a company where you've got more weight than other people do. But just as an example, say there were 70 voters overall, and 70 voted for Manny Pacquiao, but then there's so many other names on the ballot, and there was a long-time concerted PR campaign to support Pazienza. Wholly possible that he got in with 25 votes out of some of these people, and that some of these people might not be journalists. They might be people who were friends with Pazienza. I want to know who these people are, and I would want this. I've been calling for these kinds of reforms even for years, long before this kind of thing happened, just because I believe in the integrity of institutions. I don't want to say that the IBHOF doesn't have integrity, but this kind of thing hurts it. It's not good news. This, in my eyes, and this is not about Pazienza, it's about the Boxing Hall of Fame, but I feel bad saying this, but Pazienza could go down as being one of, if not the worst inductee in the modern category of the Boxing Hall of Fame. And I am emphasizing the names of the categories because somebody like Sylvester Stallone, Rocky, he's in as an observer. So somebody like a journalist or an artist or a filmmaker, there are different categories where people are being recognized. That's different. And to me, that doesn't water down the accomplishments of all these other people. And the one final thought, when I just said watered down, I don't think that the bar should be lowered when somebody like a Pazienza gets in. I don't think that every other fighter who earned 2 world titles and never defended them should be in. Just because we made one mistake or 2 or 3 or 4 doesn't mean that we should keep on perpetuating that mistake in perpetuity. Sounding like more Ronaldo there with my alliteration.
No, that's genuinely interested me, and I've learned a lot from that. And I get what you're saying now. I understand it a lot more. So yeah, it's about the right people being in the International Boxing Hall of Fame, so it doesn't become a diluted thing and loses respect.
That's exactly it.